A white cop berated an elderly black janitor in open court, branded him worthless and pushed him aside like garbage, while the crowd stayed silent. Unbeknownst to the officer, the man he degraded was once a top-tier FBI operative, and one call could summon the director herself to that very courtroom. Why would someone with such influence endure such scorn until he decided to act? Hit like if you believe respect transcends titles. And stick with us. This tale flips the entire courtroom on its head.
At 7:42 a.m., the massive wooden doors of Courtroom 4C groaned open, spilling faint winter light into the hushed, empty chamber. Only one figure stirred within, Calvin Roach, already at work. His movements were measured, purposeful, not the sluggish pace of age, but the rhythm of habit, honed by discipline and years of fading into the background for those too lofty to notice. He swept the floor, not rushing to finish, but with a reverence, as if each stroke honored memories etched in the tiles, ones he refused to let slip away. By 8s and 10s, the room filled with players in their roles, lawyers, clerks, guards, interns, none sparing him a glance. Some sidestepped him with a cold stiffness, as if his presence tainted their air. One man even grimaced, like Calvin's quiet labor clashed with the justice they came to inhale. Calvin stood unshaken, his silence a shield. Yet, for a fleeting moment, he paused by the bench, where a brass plaque sagged askew. Justice for all, it proclaimed. With a flick of his cloth, he set it straight. A subtle act, unseen by most. But to him, that creed deserved no tilt, not even from time's weight. Across the room, one pair of eyes caught the gesture. Rachel Lynn, a rookie lawyer still wrestling with her briefcase's balance, had once greeted Calvin 2 weeks prior. His nod, devoid of smiles but rich with quiet respect, lingered in her mind. "Morning, Mr. Roach," she murmured today. He met her gaze, nodded once. No words, no grin. But his look carried a depth that made her avert her eyes, not from shame, but from a sudden question. Who was this man, truly? He pressed on, cloth in one hand, dustpan in the other, his actions sharp, almost choreographed, carved into muscle by years of unseen precision. Yet Rachel's focus wasn't on his tasks, it was his gaze, probing, not scanning for stains, but dissecting the room like a strategist who once held its reins, who knew where power perched and where choices sealed fates. When a young paralegal's folder slipped, papers scattering near the jury box, Calvin was nearest. He knelt slowly, gathered each sheet with care, aligned their edges with a practiced tap, as if he'd done this 1,000 times. He placed the folder on the clerk's desk, exactly where it belonged. The clerk barely glanced up. No thanks, no nod. But Rachel saw it all, saw how Calvin knew its place without asking, a clue to a past that didn't fit his mop. Something stirred in her, not unease, but intrigue. A weight clung to him, as if he'd once borne more than cleaning tools, as if he'd stood in rooms where words reshaped lives. For a moment, she sensed he wasn't there to scrub floors, but to observe, to listen, perhaps to bide his time. By 8:15, the courtroom hummed with chatter, chairs scraping, coffee cups clinking. Calvin lingered by the side door, cloth slung over his shoulder, his eyes fixed on the bench a heartbeat too long. Then, with quiet resolve, he slipped out, not proud, not hurried, just as he always did, a shadow others forgot, but who never forgot them. No farewells followed, no words. Yet the room had spoken, unaware of its own confession. It began with mere presence. Calvin stood near Courtroom 4C's rear, just inside the double doors, out of the way. Silent, hands clasped behind him as always. The court hadn't yet convened. Voices swirled, papers shuffled in the small-town courtroom's familiar chaos. Then Officer Blake Thorne strode in, tall, White, young, his uniform less a duty than a stage prop. Spotting Calvin, his face twisted, a smirk curling like he'd found a pest in his path. His voice boomed, slicing the air. "Well, look at this. Since when does the cleaning crew weigh in on trials?" The room hushed, not fully, but enough for his venom to sink in. Calvin didn't waver, his eyes locked on Blake's, steady, unyielding, his voice calm but commanding. "I clean this court, officer, but today I'm here to hear it speak." Blake's laugh was sharp, a blade of mockery. "Hear what? Justice? That's not your job, is it?" A few heads lifted from desks. One clerk ducked hers instantly. A guard by the door coughed but stayed mute. No one stirred. From the bench, Judge Ronald Keene adjusted his glasses, eyes averted, his voice dry as dust. "Let's keep rolls clear today. Officer Thorne ensures order." "Let him." The silence turned complicit, punctuated by gallery snickers that stung where Calvin stood. It wasn't Blake's words that cut deepest. It was the void where others' voices should have been. Calvin's gaze held Blake's, but he stayed silent now, shifting slightly, like a man bracing for a long march. Blake stepped closer, lips twitching. "What's this?" "Watching a trial or playing important." Rachel, 2 rows up, froze, her case notes forgotten. She stared at Calvin, truly saw him. Something was wrong, not in the words, but in the room's apathy, as if nothing had occurred. Calvin's voice returned, softer but piercing. "No one's born important, officer. Our actions shape who we become." Blake scoffed. "Oh yeah? Mopping floors makes you something?" Calvin paused, his words more for himself than the room. "No, but I've seen those who thought a badge did." The gallery fell silent, not just uneasy, but electric, a storm brewing in the quiet. Judge Keene cleared his throat, eyes fixed forward, dodging both men. "Let's start. Bailiff, remove non-essential people if needed." Blake faced Calvin one last time. "You heard him. Time to scurry off." Rachel's lips parted, words forming, but Calvin was already stepping back. Not broken, just yielding space. He didn't beg, didn't argue. Yet his eyes, passing Blake, carried the weight of a man who'd faced worse and chosen restraint. Rachel watched him go. She'd seen janitors, seen arrogance, but this was different. What she couldn't know, what none knew yet, was that Calvin hadn't just left the room. He'd crossed a line they couldn't untrace. The supply room behind Courtroom 4C was still, its fluorescent buzz casting stark light over mop buckets and paper stacks. Calvin sat in the shadow's embrace, his hands resting loose, but his shoulders taut, not from toil, but from ghosts. He drew an ancient phone from his coat, its screen fogged with scratches. He opened the contacts. One name glowed: Clade. No photo, no title, just those letters. His thumb lingered, poised but still. Instead, he reached beneath the bench for a weathered wooden box, scarred but sealed with a brass clasp. He eased it open. Inside lay a folded handkerchief, an FBI challenge coin worn by time, and a faded photo, edges curled from sweat and years. In it, Calvin stood beside a younger Cynthia Lair, both clad in field gear, flak jackets dirt-streaked, faces slick with rain, or fear. Behind them, smoke, sandbags, a concrete rooftop far from Courtroom's polish, a place where names held weight only if they saved lives. He traced the photo's edge, slow, sacred, then tucked it away. No one here knew that name, not as she did, not as he did. Long ago he'd roamed Langley's and Quantico's halls, not with a mop, but a clearance badge. Calvin Roach, senior analyst, counterintelligence. The man who cracked codes like sacred texts, who thwarted a consulate bombing in Algeria, who unraveled a mole ring in Brussels from a Virginia desk, who warned Cynthia Lair of a traitor in their midst 12 hours before others caught on. But intelligence wasn't about glory. It was about silence. Until that silence betrayed him. The agency changed. Promotions turned political. Missions became pawns. Calvin, never brash, never currying favor, became a liability. Then came the charge. Misuse of access. Unproven, informal, but enough to nudge him out. For the Bureau's good. Fight and lose all, or walk away before they warped his name. He chose the latter. He left as he exited the courtroom that morning. Quiet, upright, with dignity they didn't expect him to keep. He never called Cynthia. Not once. Not as she climbed ranks. Not when she became director. Not even when her card arrived, scrawled with, "They don't know what they lost. But I do." He never answered, not seeking fame but guarding his soul. Now, in this dim room, her name glowed on his screen, the courtroom's hum mocking his erasure. Blake's taunts echoed faintly. Judge Keene's apathy clung to the air. His thumb hovered over call, but he held back. That phone wasn't just a device. It was a bridge between who he'd been and who they saw now. Dialing meant reclaiming a world he'd buried with grace. He snapped the phone shut, pocketed it. Not yet. Not until silence had run its course, and perhaps, just perhaps, it no longer sufficed. It unfolded so fast, witnesses doubted their eyes. The hallway outside Courtroom 4C echoed with footsteps and brisk chatter, steeped in the scent of paper, coffee, and polished wood. Calvin walked with his usual calm, hands loose, head steady, threading past court staff and lawyers awaiting the next case. He blocked no one's path. He never did. But Blake Thorne was ready. He lounged against the wall, arms folded, feigning phone scrolling. As Calvin neared, Blake slid into his way, just enough to provoke, not enough to justify a report. "Still drifting around like you own this place." His voice, low but cutting, dared the hall to ignore it. Calvin didn't halt, just sidestepped, murmuring, "I work here, same as every day." Blake's lip curled. Yeah, like a parasite on a host. The word stung sharper than its volume. The air grew thin. A clerk at the hall's end froze. Another bowed her head. A guard by the doors looked away. Calvin stopped, not for the slur, but for the silence it birthed. "You've said enough, officer," he said, eyes forward. That's when Blake struck. A sharp crack shattered the quiet, a sound so raw it shook the hall's bones. Calvin's hat spun off, landing with a soft thud on the tile. Time stalled. No one breathed, no one spoke. Blake loomed, hands half raised, then leaned down and spat on the fallen hat. The sound hit harder than the blow. "That's for your silence," he growled. Calvin said nothing. Not yet. He knelt, slow and deliberate, retrieving the hat. One hand gripped the brim, the other wiped the spit with his sleeve's cuff. His motions were precise, but his face had shifted, lips tight, eyes still but burning with a quiet fire. Marcus, the young maintenance worker who shared coffee laughs with Calvin, stood 10 feet off. He didn't move, didn't speak, his eyes glued to his shoes, seeking escape. Nearby, Rachel stood rooted. Too late to stop the slap, she'd heard it, heard the words, and now watched, her face taut with unlearned fury. Calvin set the stained, creased cap back on, turned, and walked away. No haste, no tremor, but each step heavy, as if an old wound had split anew. He headed straight for Judge Keene's chambers. Inside, Keene sat, glasses low, scanning a docket. He glanced up, cold. "Your Honor," Calvin said softly. "Officer Thorne struck me outside, insulted me, spat on my cap." It was unprovoked. Keene blinked once, twice, then sighed, like Calvin reported a trivial glitch. "I've spoken with Officer Thorne," he said flatly. "He claims you were confrontational." Calvin didn't flinch. "That's a lie." Keene leaned back, fingers steepled. "Mr. Roach, you've been here a while, and I respect that. But this isn't the first time you've overstepped your role. We can't afford disruptions now." "Disruption?" Calvin's voice rose just a fraction. "I was assaulted before court staff." Keen's eyes narrowed, chilling the room. "Take it to building services," he snapped. "I don't handle janitor complaints." Calvin stood silent, staring at the judge who could tilt justice with a word, and saw no justice here. "Understood," he said. Not bitter, not pleading, just final. He turned to go. Rachel, in the corridor, watched him emerge, his face blank but shoulders sagging heavier than before. She didn't stop him. Not yet. Her jaw clenched, hands shaking. She glared at Keen's door, then at the man walking away, not with dignity lost, but with something deeper, heavier. The system hadn't just ignored him. It had stared him down and declared, "You're nothing here." Near noon, Calvin stepped outside the courthouse. Sunlight blazed, but it felt raw, exposing, as if his soul lay bare, and every corner conspired in his shame. He didn't wander far, just to the service corridor's end, past a rusted dumpster where old files and broken chairs rotted. A concrete bench waited, stained, slanted, but silent. For once, no eyes followed. He sat heavily, drew out that battered phone, its keypad worn, screen scarred. He held it, staring at the lone contact, Clade. It didn't speak first. His thumb danced over the call button, up, down, up, down. He wasn't ready, not truly. For dialing meant admitting silence had failed, that the man who shunned acclaim now craved recognition. He drew a sharp, bitter breath and pressed. It rang twice. 300 miles away, in a sleek conference room, Cynthia Lair presided over a table of assistant directors and chiefs, her presence a quiet command. Charts plastered the walls, budgets clashed in debate. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down, and the world faded. Voices dimmed, time slowed. That name, unseen for a decade, still Cynthia leaned against the wall, eyes shut. "What did they do?" "They showed me," he said, "that when you're unseen, you start becoming what they want. I'm not ready for that." "I know who you are, Calvin," she whispered. "Always have." His voice broke, faint. "I never wanted to ask. Never." "I know. Then why does it feel like I failed?" She paused, then answered, "Dignity feels like defeat when no one sees it. But I see you now. I'm coming." He didn't thank her. He didn't need to. He hung up, the phone a stone on his thigh. Across the courtyard, Marcus watched, not meaning to. On a break, sandwich in hand, appetite gone, he saw Calvin. Alone, hunched, one hand trembling, the other clutching the phone like a lifeline. He didn't approach, didn't speak, but lingered, shame settling in for his silence during the slap, for not nodding as Calvin passed. Seeing the man who once chuckled over coffee make that call, voice heavy, twisted Marcus's heart. He turned away, not from indifference, but from late-blooming care, heavier than silence ever was. Calvin sat long, the phone still warm. Years had forged his silence, but one call began its unraveling. She rose wordlessly, slipped out, and shut the door. "Calvin," she said, voice steady, heart racing. A pause, filled with distant traffic and wind. "I kept quiet too long," he said at last. "But they've made me forget why." Just past 2 o'clock, a knock came, firm, unhurried, as if its owner needed no introduction. Judge Keen, skimming a sentencing memo he barely read, looked up. "Yes," he called, uninterested. A young clerk entered, eyes wide, voice unsteady. "Sir, this came from the front gate." She offered a folded note, official, urgent, but calm. No red stamps, just institutional weight in ink. Keen took it, exuding untouchable authority. He read it once, then again, lips parting. It was brief. FBI Director Cynthia Lair, en route, ETA 30 minutes. No announcement requested, personal visit, not yet official. For the first time that week, he set his glasses down with both hands, then hit the intercom. "Officer Thorne, to my chambers, now." Blake sauntered in, posture loose, arrogance untouched. "You called, sir?" Keene didn't look up, eyes on the note. Slowly, he folded it, slid it into a drawer, and clicked it shut. "Tell me," he said at last, "what exactly happened with Mr. Roach?" Blake smirked. "The janitor." Keene's eyes lifted, tone flat. "Yes, the janitor." Blake shrugged, leaning back. He was loitering, eyeing the hearing like he mattered. "I told him to move. He got mouthy." "You struck him." Blake's grin held. "A light tap. He played it up." "You spat on him." "Your word, not mine." Keene paused. "Do you know who Mr. Roach was?" Blake laughed. "A janitor?" Keene leaned forward, no trace of warmth. "Pray the FBI director sees it that way." The silence was brief but heavy. Blake's smirk wavered. "Wait, you're saying—" "I'm saying nothing," Keene cut in. "But someone's coming who might say plenty. You'll stay quiet unless addressed." "Clear." Blake shifted, unease creeping in. "This is absurd. Over a janitor?" Keene waved him out, unanswered. Blake left, jaw tight, face paling. Down the corridor, Rachel had paused, not intending to eavesdrop. But Blake's voice hooked her, and Keene's prey froze her steps. She slipped out her phone, recording just enough. The tone, the dismissal, the arrogance, Keene's veiled threat. More cover-up than truth-seeking. She saved it, eyes on the main entrance. Something massive was stirring, and for the first time since the slap, Rachel wasn't just a bystander. She was ready. No one noticed the car arrive. No lights, no sirens, just a black sedan gliding to the curb, silent and precise. It demanded no eyes, yet its presence shifted the air. Inside Courtroom 4C, the drone of rustling papers and shifting seats dulled the air. Calvin sat at the room's edge, hands folded, still as stone, waiting with a patience carved from costly seconds. For a moment, he feared she wouldn't come, that his call was too late, that he'd overreached after years of quiet. The doubt settled, cold and heavy in his chest. Then the door swung open, no knock, no pause. She entered, the room bending to her presence. Cynthia Lair wore no uniform, no badge, but her arrival reshaped the space, not by what she carried, but by what she shed. Doubt, fear, permission. Those were long gone. She ignored the judge, the crowd. Her eyes found Calvin, and she strode down the aisle, each step a pulse, as if nothing else existed. He looked up, his shoulders easing, not in defeat, but in recognition of a bond unbroken. Reaching him, she rested a hand on his shoulder, firm yet gentle. Her voice, soft but resonant, filled the room. "You stood for me when no one else did. I'm here for you now." Calvin stayed silent, not yet ready. His gaze met hers, a silent exchange of memories, debts, and battles they'd never fully shared. Judge Keene stirred, uncertain if he should intervene. "Director Lair," he ventured, voice caught between respect and caution. "This is highly irregular." She turned slightly. "So is what happened here. So is assault. So is silence." Keene shifted uneasily. "Are you here officially?" he probed. "As a citizen, a witness. I request to speak." A pause. Keene lacked a good reply. He nodded stiffly. "Granted." Cynthia stepped forward, her hand lingering on Calvin's shoulder before facing the bench. "I've known Calvin Roach for over 20 years. I owe him my life, not poetically, but literally. He saved me in a place we shouldn't have survived. He saved countless others, asking no praise, no medals, no thanks. He served this nation with a soul nearly broken by it." Her voice softened, unshaken. Yet here, he was treated like filth. Spat on, struck, mocked before this court, and no one stopped it. She turned, her gaze sweeping the room. No one met it. If justice lets a man like Calvin Roach be shamed without cost, it's not broken, it's a lie. And we all share that lie when we stay quiet. Keene opened his mouth, but no sound came. He sat, glasses in hand, searching the walls for protocol, finding none. Across the room, Blake shifted, jaw locked, his smirk erased. From the second row, Rachel rose, unbidden. "I saw the assault," she declared, voice clear. The officer's words, his actions. "I recorded the exchange outside. I'll swear to it here. We all saw it. The question is, what will we do?" A chair creaked. A woman gasped softly in the back. No shouts, no chaos, just a silence heavier than shame. A man by the aisle stood, hat doffed in quiet respect. A woman clutched her purse, face etched with disbelief. Calvin didn't stir, didn't speak, his eyes fixed forward, not with rage, not pride, but a quiet certainty, as if he'd reclaimed his name and found it waiting. In that silence, no one dared look away. Cynthia stood, commanding the room's heart without raising her voice. She didn't flinch, didn't shift, yet everyone leaned closer, drawn to her words' sacred weight. "He stopped a war once," she said softly, "not with bullets or commands, but a file." Brows furrowed, some doubting their ears. His report spared over 2,000 troops a death trap. No headlines, no TV. But families kept their loved ones because of him. She looked at Calvin, still as stone. "And today," she said, her pause heavy, "you spat on him." The truth landed, raw, unadorned, inescapable. No one moved. Keene shrank in his seat, the bench's height failing him. Rachel, still standing, raised her phone. "I recorded Judge Keene and Officer Thorne minutes ago," she said. "You hear it all. Their words, their intent." She walked forward, calm but fierce, and set the phone on the evidence rail. "It's with the ethics board already," she said. "This is for you." Keene reached for it, cautious, as if it burned. His fingers shook faintly. Blake sat rigid, eyes darting, seeking an ally. None looked back. Cynthia didn't push for punishment, didn't demand sanctions. "I'm not here to ruin anyone," she said. "I'm here to remind us of what we forgot." To the crowd, she added, "Justice's hardest task is truth, when it's inconvenient to hear." The air froze, charged with shame and awe. Calvin hadn't spoken all day, but now he held his head high, not proud, not defiant, just sure, as if the room had finally seen him true. No one moved, not Keene, not Blake, not the jury, bailiff, or sweating clerk. Then, slowly, Calvin Roach stood, not with drama, but with the steady resolve of a man too long silenced. He didn't pause for attention. He just spoke, as if resuming a thought held for years. "I once thought silence was strength," he said softly, "that holding your peace would show the world your truth." He stopped, his voice even but thunderous in the hush. Facing Judge Keene, he said, "Your sign claims equal under law, but justice doesn't see blindly. It forgets its builders." Keene flinched, not guilty yet, but seen. Calvin's eyes turned to Blake, colder, precise. "You wear a badge," he said, "but never earned it. You thought it made you law. It only hid you." Blake's lips twitched, but he stayed silent, his smirk gone. Calvin stepped forward once, claiming space. "I cleaned this courthouse," he said. "Watched you preach truth and freedom while passing me like I didn't breathe. You thought my mop meant my mind was trash." His gaze swept the room, slow, piercing all. "I saw it all. I remembered it all. I never thought I'd have to speak it." He looked at Cynthia, then Rachel, his voice softening. "Thank you," he said, "for not turning away, for knowing silence is a choice." Rachel nodded, eyes shining. Cynthia offered a faint smile, her hand on his chair's back. His voice fell, a whisper. "I've faced rooms of rifles and hate, chaos and medals, but nothing." He paused, eyes narrowing. "Nothing cuts like being invisible in the house you built." The room stood still. No blinks, no shifts, the walls listening. "I'm not here for my name," Calvin said, breathing deep, "or titles, or your table seat. I came because I'm done being erased. Silence stopped being peace. It's choking me." To Keen, "I don't want your apology." To Blake, "I don't need your regret." To the room, his steps echoing. Stop taking silence for agreement. Some stay quiet from fear. Some wait for you to hear. He glanced at the floor he'd cleaned 15 years, then stood taller. Not angry, not proud, but clear. "I'm not just a janitor. I'm not just a past. I'm what this system owes." With that, Calvin Roach sat, seen fully for the first time. A week later, the courthouse felt lighter. Not quieter, but less burdened. Morning light still streamed through tall windows. Footsteps still creaked in the east corridor. Yet something had shifted, in the pauses by courtroom doors, in the glances his way. Calvin Roach returned. Same boots, same blue uniform, same mop. But no one brushed past now. No one looked through him. Those avoiding his gaze stepped aside, nodding, as if he carried something holy. Above Courtroom 4C's doors, beside the judge's plaque, a new sign gleamed. Small, etched deep, unnoticed, unless sought. In honor of Calvin Roach, quiet integrity, lasting impact. He glanced at it once, then pushed his cart on. The floor still needed him. Elsewhere, Marcus sat in the clerk's lounge, rereading his law school application email, untold, even to his mother. Calvin's voice, not words, but silence, echoed, demanding truth softly. It had awakened him to justice's feel. Rachel faced a news camera, hands trembling, voice firm. "This is about accountability," she said, "not just for Calvin Roach, but for what we've let fester in law's halls." She didn't name Blake. No need. Cynthia's shared recording, Rachel's quiet capture, reached internal affairs. Blake was suspended. Keen faced review. But this wasn't about them. It was about tomorrow. Rachel's first lead case, a class action suit on racial bias in court conduct. Calvin's words fueled every deposition. In her drawer, a note from Cynthia. "You never needed a title, but you gave mine meaning." Calvin didn't reply. He didn't need to. He moved through Courtroom 4C as ever, wiping benches, writing signs, nudging a Frederick Douglass portrait straight by the jury box. Unasked, he preferred order. That morning, as he scrubbed a scuff near the witness stand, a young man in a crisp suit paused at the door. He stepped back. "I'll wait till you're done," he said softly. Calvin nodded, mopping on. He sought no applause, raised no voice. But the walls knew his name now. The floor knew its walker. And the people, they'd begun to listen. He gathered his mop, cloth, and old rag for polishing handrails. No fanfare, no speech, just his daily path. This time, someone held the door. The narrator's voice falls, reflective, soft. He never stood at the bench. That day, the court stood for him. Some stories linger past the credits. Calvin Roach taught us strength isn't always in titles or uniforms. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, the courage to rise, not to strike back, but to remind the world what justice should be. If this moved you, like the video, share it with someone who values quiet strength, and subscribe to our story at Story Hub for more tales like this. Your support keeps unheard stories alive. Tales of dignity, memory, truth. At our Story at Story Hub, we don't just tell stories.